Fallout Season 2 doesn't just close a chapter, it detonates one. The finale reframes everything we thought we knew about Hank, the vaults, and the so-called rebuilding of civilization. What looks, on the surface, like a desperate endgame turns out to be a carefully layered plan decades in the making, and that, Blinkendul Mysit post-credits scene quietly, points the series toward an even darker future. Let's unpack what Hank was really trying to do, why the ending matters, and how the post-credits stinger changes the board entirely. Hank was never just surviving, he was curating the wasteland throughout Season 2. Hank presents himself as a pragmatist, a man shaped by loss who believes the old world failed because it tried to save everyone. His actions in the finale confirmed that this wasn't bitterness, it was ideology. Hank's core belief is brutally simple: civilization can't be rebuilt from chaos. It must be selected. The wasteland, in his view, isn't a tragedy, it's a filter. By the time we reach the final episode, it becomes clear that Hank's plan was never about seizing power in the traditional sense. He wasn't trying to rule the wasteland like a warlord. He was trying to decide who gets to inherit the future. That's why his focus remains fixed on vault populations, genetic data, and behavioral outcomes rather than territory or weapons. Hank sees the vaults not as shelters, but as long-term experiments, and himself as the final arbiter of their results. The endgame, resetting the resetter, finale reveals that Hank's true objective is to trigger what he believes is a controlled collapse. By destabilizing the fragile alliances forming across the wasteland, he hopes to prevent what he sees as a repeat of pre-war society: messy, unequal, and doomed. His logic is chilling but consistent. Let emerging settlements fail before they grow powerful enough to recreate the same hierarchies. Preserve vault populations deemed viable based on obedience, adaptability, and genetic stability. Use scarcity as a tool to force evolution, social and biological. In other words, Hank doesn't want to rebuild the world as it was. He wants to edit humanity. This reframes many of his earlier decisions: the betrayals, the calculated delays, even moments that seemed like mercy all slot into a single strategy: stretch the wasteland's suffering just long enough to see which groups endure without losing control. Why Hank loses. Even when he wins on paper, Hank doesn't completely fail. Key elements of his plan remain intact by the final moments of the episode. Data survives. Vault infrastructure still exists. Certain contingencies are clearly still active. But the real loss comes from something Hank never accounted for: unpredictable loyalty. Characters he assumed would act out of self-interest instead choose solidarity. Others reject the vault logic entirely, embracing a future built on mutual risk rather than curated survival. Hank understands systems, not people. The finale makes a point of showing that while Hank can manipulate environments, he can't fully control how trauma reshapes human values. The wasteland hasn't just hardened its survivors, it's taught them to question authority at a fundamental level's. The irony at the heart of his defeat: the very chaos he tried to harness produces resistance. He can't model or manage the post-credits scene, the lie beneath the vaults. Then comes the post-credits scene, short, quiet, and far more unsettling than the finale's explosions. Without diving into unnecessary the stinger strongly suggests that Hank was never operating alone, nor was his philosophy unique. The implication is that his actions are part of a broader framework, possibly predating even the Vault-Tec experiments we've seen so far. What makes this moment so disturbing isn't the reveal of another villain, but the idea that Hank may have been a middle manager in a much longer chain of control. The scene hints at preserved authority structures, still monitoring vault outcomes. Data being collected not just locally, but across regions, a version of oversight that survived the bombs more cleanly than anyone realized. If Season 1 asked whether the old world deserved to die, and Season 2 asked who gets to rebuild it, the post-credits scene asks something far worse. What if the apocalypse didn't end the system at all? It just refined it. What this sets up for Season 3 taken together: the finale and post-credits scene shift Fallout from a survival story into something closer to a philosophical war. Season 3 now seems poised to explore whether freedom is possible in a world built on inherited experiments. How much of human behavior is shaped by environment versus choice, and whether tearing down the last remnants of the old world also means losing the tools needed to build anything new. Hank's plan may be broken, but the mindset behind it clearly isn't gone. The true threat moving forward isn't a single antagonist. It's the persistence of systems that believe suffering is an acceptable cost for progress. The big takeaway: the Season 2 ending works because it refuses to give easy answers. Hank isn't a cartoon villain, and his ideas aren't dismissed outright, they're challenged by lived experience, community, and messy humanity. The post-credits scene ensures that the fight isn't over, but it also raises the stakes beyond guns and territory. The next battle in Fallout won't just be for land or resources, it'll be for the right to decide what kind of people deserve a future at all, and who gets to make that call. And in the wasteland, that might be the most dangerous power of all.